Thank you, everybody, for joining our year in review session. I'm going to take 100% blame for this if you don't like it, because I didn't actually have the opportunity to review it with George. I did have an assistant, but my assistant is an automated LLM, so I can only blame me as the person. What I'd like to do over the next 45 minutes is provide you a summary of what we've heard from you as a community, from you as workgroup leads, and from our external accomplishments, what others are able to discern about what we've accomplished for the year. Hope that this can be a celebration of what we've accomplished, but also maybe some feedback about where we could actually go together as a community moving into 2026. As part of this, I have opened up a poll everywhere survey. If you go to pollev.com/PatrickRyan800, Craig will put that link in the chat as well. We will come back to your reflections at the end of this and like to open up the conversation for it. So as you are thinking about Odyssey in 2025, if you have any reflections, whether they be questions, comments, highlights, lowlights, any observations, things you just want to share, please put that in the pollev.com/PatrickRyan800 link. And if you see something that resonates with you, go ahead and upvote that, and we'll take a look at that. And keep that open on your phone or your other screen, and enter feedback as I go through. Potentially what I'll present will kind of jog some thoughts about Odyssey in 2025 for you. So our mission has been, for the last decade, to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. And as I aimed to summarize this, our year in review, I think really we want to use this mission as our measuring stick for how well we're doing to try to achieve this mission. Craig does a wonderful job every year in producing an annual report, which happens to simultaneously come out with the global symposium. This year, because it was a digital document, Craig has actually been updating it with some facts and figures from that came out of the symposium. So I encourage you to download the latest version of this. There's a little bit of content that I'm going to be sharing that came straight out of this book, but actually this year in review is also a reflection of what's happened since the global symposium back in early October. So as a community, one of our goals is to establish a community and enable collaborations with individuals around the world. As of this weekend, we've now grown to 4,800 collaborators, that being measured by how many people have signed up to be a member in our Odyssey Teams environment. We also now have over 9,400 followers on LinkedIn. So I'm really curious about who these other 4,500 folks are that are watching us from afar but aren't willing to join us. But I think that the opportunity that this represents is, as a community with thousands of researchers around the world, it really presents the opportunity to think about, like, what could we actually accomplish if we can figure out the most effective way to truly work as one community towards our shared objectives. Oops. One aspect of building community that Craig mentioned briefly in his updates is the work that we try to do to bring people together. And we've seen this year growth in our work in developing community across the globe and within geographic regions. So I want to take this moment to thank our leadership in our regional chapters and our national nodes, and to celebrate the progress that we've made towards community building. One personal opinion that I've got about things is that having a meeting should neither be an objective nor an accomplishment. It's what happens at the meeting that actually matters. However, what I've learned over the last decade is that having meetings that force people to come together is the catalyst that can facilitate collaboration and meaningful interactions from folks. And from that perspective, I think we have a lot to be proud of this year. The first major Odyssey community event took place in July at the Odyssey Europe Symposium in Hasselt, and it was great to see so many folks come together from across the European region, and indeed internationally coming together. One reflection about this community building activity is that not only did it definitely inspire a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but it also sought to figure out how we could work together as a community towards some shared European needs. We saw showcase the work of the Darwin EU effort. We also saw discussions about how OHDSI can really figure into the evolving European health data space legislation. And I think that that's a good example of where a community effort is really necessary for us to advance the use of real-world data and the opportunities for real-world evidence. Also highlight the UK symposium that took place in September in London. I'll still rib Alex for telling me that I couldn't get off the wait list to join it. So I only got to enjoy learning about it from afar, but it was great to see how many different collaborators are coming together in this national effort and how the national effort was pulling in experts from around the world to try to allow UK to build its own national infrastructure based on the OMOP Common Data Model and OHDSI tools. We had a great time for those of you who made it to New Brunswick, New Jersey in the US for our global symposium. It was great to have everybody together. And one of the key themes that we really tried to push here was this idea of global collaboration. And so it was great to see so much representation from over 40 countries represented in the world, in the room, as well as to see the work that was coming from industry, academia, and government together, showcased and hopefully fostering future collaborations, particularly along the lines of building trust and evidence, which was a core theme that we tried to inject in the conversation. In November, we had a series of events. The first event in Sweden took place. So I want to thank Christian in Jordan for putting on what's an important effort, given that the Swedish national data is a tremendously valuable resource, but fundamentally it requires collaboration across stakeholders to tap into this resource. So it was great to see so many folks come together in Stockholm to participate in this. A huge milestone for our community was the OHDSI Africa Symposium, with big thanks to Agnes and Cynthia and support from Alex to bring folks together in Kampala, which was one of the big insights that came out of here was how many folks were actually doing work using the OMOP Common Data Model and trying to use OHDSI's infrastructure to facilitate research in ways that many people didn't know if it weren't for the fact that we brought people in a room to share their progress and insights with each other, which was a great testament. So it was a congratulations and a big milestone to see progress made in the low and middle income countries and where OHDSI can have a big impact. We had a great event in Toronto at the Pan-Canadian OMOP event. Again, the recurring theme was how much work is happening in silos, that holding a community event is where you can actually learn from each other. One of the fun stories that happened in Toronto is that a few folks actually met each other accidentally at a bus stop and learned by overhearing that, hey, you're working on OMOP too? That's clearly not the way the community should actually be organized and structured to do it. But by bringing everybody together, we could actually see a real opportunity for the first time towards a Canadian-wide solution across the provinces with a lot of enthusiasm from multiple stakeholders to bring that together. As Craig highlighted just last week, we had our second OHDSI India Symposium, and it was a great job by Swetha and the team to organize and bring folks together and really get building in that shared enthusiasm for what's possible in the world's most populous country. And then just a couple days ago, we finished up our OHDSI APAC Symposium, and I'm really looking forward to getting a full report out of that. What I heard from my friends and colleagues that were in Shanghai was that it was a great time to be together. The pictures that I received on my phone are not worth sharing, but apparently Chan did showcase his karaoke skills, and so we'll look forward to learning more about that in addition to all the great scholarship that was shared in the APAC region. So I think all of these events represent a core pillar of our work, which is community building. But as I want to reinforce, like holding meetings and having a good time together, maybe that's an accelerant to what our goal is, but ultimately our goal needs to be collaboration to generate reliable evidence and improve the lives of patients. So as a community, we are collaborating across multiple dimensions: data standards, methods research, clinical applications, open source development. And these are pillars that we also think about the progress we're making within. Many folks talk about the OHDSI evidence network and our distributed data network capability, where anybody can standardize their data, anybody can use open source tools to execute network studies. And we talk a lot about how we want to be able to do more OHDSI network studies by encouraging the community to bring forward research questions implemented as analysis specifications, codified using our open source tools to collaboratively generate evidence that can be shared while protecting patient privacy and enabling collaborative interpretation and dissemination of the results. The question really, looking back at 2025, is how much progress we made in each of these dimensions as a community. As it relates to the OMOP common data model, we've made a conscious decision to stay stable on this standard while also seeing encouraging progress towards optional extensions that were showcased at many of the symposiums this year. And I actually think while I've heard some grumbling about, geez, this standard hasn't changed, it's not that we have failed to change. It's that we've made a deliberate choice to stay stable so that the community can have a foundation, a stable foundation to build off of. And I think that's an important recognition and accomplishment that we should recognize that our open community data standard has been able to be a foundation, stable and consistent around the world for multiple years now. We stopped keeping track of how many folks are using the OMOP common data model. This is actually our inventory from last year. All I can say is that this year's community events showcased how many people are using the OMOP common data model that we have no idea about. And actually, George and I were just talking this weekend about George was reading a bunch of papers. He's like, I don't know who these people are, but they're using the OMOP common data model too. And this seems to be happening to me on like a weekly basis where it's interesting to watch a standard effectively become just ubiquitous, that people don't need to be part of our community because it's just a thing that people just are expected to do in the RWE field. And I think that that's something that's worth celebrating, though it does make our job harder in terms of acknowledging and recognizing all of the use of the work that we are doing as a community. I want to celebrate that the OMOP, OHDSI standardized vocabulary and the vocabulary team under Anna's leadership has done a wonderful job of having 2 successful vocabulary releases that has really improved the maturity of the vocabulary content, but also we've been working very hard to ensure that we have a coordinated community approach to how we can evolve this community standard moving forward. And this is a particular challenge that we're going to continue to invest a lot of energy in, but I want to celebrate the fact that all of you have free and open access to a tremendously valuable global resource because of the work of this community, and we've made great progress there that we should be proud of. As it relates to open source development, Hades has now matured to 41 R packages, 22 of them are in CRAN. In 2025 alone, we had 88 releases of updates to the Hades packages. If you think about that, that means we've had more than a release a week for all of these packages, and that's a tremendous amount of work from all of the maintainers and other contributors to this package. And it's a huge burden of effort that's being made. It also means that our technology is updated and innovating extremely fast. And so anybody who says like, oh, I used that OHDSI thing, a couple years ago, they are many, many, many iterations behind, because that really represents the pace of innovation that we're bringing to the table. So I want to thank all of our open source developers for their contributions. In terms of OHDSI scholarship, collectively over the last decade, we've published over 900 papers. But in 2025 alone, we published over 150 publications. And that's actually like 3 a week. Craig does a good job of trying to find the papers that are published and showcasing them on our weekly calls. Craig and I together, we try to monitor the literature and find things. And what's amazing to me is I read every one of those papers that I find. At this point, I'd say like 80% of the papers, I have no idea about this research is ongoing, what it is. I may or may not know some of the collaborators, but I'm always excited to see the innovations that's happening. I also see this as an area that cuts both ways. It's exciting to see the expansion of the community. It's also a little bit dispiriting to not know of all the great stuff that's going on until after the point that the research is published. I think that there's an opportunity for us to figure out how can we learn from each other earlier in the research scholarship process, not just like waiting to hope to find a paper that's published. But indeed, I think it's amazing to think about, we often hear about clinician overload and how are they supposed to actually keep up with evidence about their clinical subspecialty when there's hundreds of papers published all the time and guidelines are always changing. And I personally am feeling like even OHDSI is getting to the point that it's hard for me to even keep track of everything that's going on because of such progress we've been making in expanding scholarship in the area of real world evidence. All right, so changing gears just a little bit, at the Global Symposium this year, I tasked those that were in the room to do a network activity where you filled out Post-it notes. I asked 3 questions. What are you doing in OHDSI? What do you want to be doing in OHDSI? And what do you need help to do in OHDSI? And I asked you all to fill in these Post-it notes and hang them around the room. I see many friendly faces on those that I can see in the Teams meeting. I don't know if everybody who's there knows about this activity, but basically the way it worked is like we wrote a Post-it note, like I wrote, what am I doing in OHDSI? Well, I'm working on methods research to explore heterogeneity across the OHDSI evidence network. And I just wrote this blue sticky and I hung it up the wall under the category of methods research. And then what do I want to be doing in OHDSI? Well, I want to build the world's pharmacovigilance system for all drugs and all health outcomes. You're probably all sick of hearing me state my objective, but at some point I'm going to keep saying this until it actually exists, and then I can move on to something else that would be more useful. But this objective I hung underneath of my clinical applications wall to state the what do I want to be doing. And I stated that what do I need help? Well, I need to see more data partners in the OHDSI community join the OHDSI Evidence Network so that we can improve the precision and accuracy of the evidence from studies. And I hung that under our data standards wall. Well, collectively at the symposium, we had everybody in the room go and fill the walls with all of these stickies. And at the end, in the closing talk, I actually suggested a single challenge for people, which was go up to a wall, find one comment that seems actionable, grab it off the wall, and send a single email. I don't know how many of you actually did that task. I suggest that it's probably not everybody did this. However, what you may not know is that after we were done, some of us actually had to clean up the room and the giant mess we made with all of those globe beach balls and all of these stickies that were hanging around the room. Well, I kept all of these Post-it notes about data standards and open source development and methods research and clinical applications. I kept those Post-it notes thinking that I really wanted to actually truly hear from you and learn from you about your experiences. So as I was preparing a couple shout outs of things that I saw when I read all these stickies, first, I'm going to highlight Julie Cha. If you're going to do a cool Post-it that's going to be memorable, you should definitely figure out a way to draw smiley-faced teeth, because that's a good way to promote the dentistry work group that I think Robert needs to take on. Anytime we see a smiley-faced tooth, that's going to be a way to catch up on things of interest. I'll also highlight that I was almost going mad because Matthew McDermott, his name kept popping up all over the walls. And I realized that Matthew, as one of our leaders in patient-level predictions, very interested in external validation. And so what he did was he wrote the exact same Post-it and hung it under each of the 4 walls so that people could see it. Though I will also note that his AUC is not perfect because he did misspell his own name on one of his Post-it notes. I want to shout out this one that was unnamed. Somebody asked that what they wanted was scheduled nap time during the symposium. I don't actually know who posted this, but I'll just assert that I'm pretty sure Mark Suchard's answer to this is exactly the time when Patrick gets up on the podium at the OHDSI Global Symposium. That's when you can go ahead and take a snooze. And then I'll also shout out that we had similar thoughts in the community. We had Alex suggest that what he wants is to conduct more network studies and have a symposium in Hawaii. And Mui said, well, the next OHDSI Global Symposium should be in Hawaii. And I think it's not without irony that very close to this sticker was a sticker from George that says, what we need help is in funding OHDSI. So before we talk about going to Hawaii, let's first figure out how we can pay to go to New Jersey, and maybe then we can worry about the bigger opportunities ahead of us as a community. But besides all of that silliness, It's a lot of stickers on a lot of walls. So what I actually did was, in addition to manually reading all of those stickers, I also scanned all 732 Post-it notes that were left in the room. And then I was like, well, what do I do now that I got 700 pictures? Well, I wrote in R script to read all the Post-it notes and perform OCR and text extraction and color recognition of those Post-it notes using our friend GPT. And then once I had all of that extracted information from all your Post-it notes, I prompted GPT to ask, give me a summary of the themes of these statements of as OHDSI. What are we doing? What do we want to be doing? And what do we need help doing? While I did make some light edits for purposes of putting in these slides to present to you, I will say that these thoughts that are coming out are really your thoughts as represented by what GPT summarized, and I thought that it did a pretty remarkably good job. So I'd like to go through with you the themes of what we heard from you all at the Global Symposium, hoping that these are things that resonate when we think about the year and where we want to go together. One of the themes was about the OMOP Common Data Model and data network growth. There was a lot of interest in seeing that we have more data partners, improved ETL pipelines, expanding expertise in the OHDSI vocabulary, but also needs in the areas of supporting organizations with their first conversion to the data sets. One shared community need was we need to figure out how to have hands-on support for CDM conversion, quality assessment, vocabularies, and sustaining data nodes. And I saw this across many of the different stickers. The one thing that I'll highlight is that so many people are saying, hey, I took on this problem alone and let me showcase what I did alone. Very few people were actually talking about how we could actually build together as a community common tools and common practices that everybody else could actually benefit from. And so I see that as a maturation of our community in terms of where we are at and where we want to be that's worthwhile to call out. Second theme was about AI, machine learning, and Gen AI. There was a clear cluster around using AI and ML. It was not all just Matthew McDermott's Post-its, but there's a lot of interest in AA and ML for prediction, phenotyping, and causal inference, as well as thinking about how Gen AI can actually improve the efficiency of our processes for study design and summarizing evidence. And while it's recognized the opportunity that Gen AI offers, there also is a recognition that there's a need for us to improve evaluation of AI and making sure that we are ensuring responsible use. So a shared community need recognized here was about training best practices and example pipelines and guidance for how we actually integrate AI methods into all of our OHDSI tools, which I think is, we saw really great progress in this space. However, this is another area where I thought we saw lots of people doing lots of individual things by themselves. And there's a real opportunity for us to figure out how do we actually bring that together as a community. Third theme that really came out from your Post-it notes was about methods research and causal inference and study design. There was work that emphasized the need for methods development, not only the methodologic approaches that were currently implemented as best practices in our Hades tools, but also thinking about emerging approaches that are coming out. With our theme on trust and evidence, it became clear that it's not only about us building tools that do produce high-grade evidence, but it's also proving that our methods produce high-grade evidence and ensuring that we can do that at scale across our network. A clear shared need that was coming out, though, is we heard people want more collaboration as it relates to mentoring in the methods research space, in terms of shared code libraries, in terms of greater collaboration in design of network studies. A fourth theme that came out was around education, community, and capacity building. We heard a lot about localized efforts to build training programs and to start creating curriculums and work groups. And folks were highlighting both what they're making progress towards, but also the very clear need that local institutions have to try to get people up to speed. I think an opportunity and recognized as a shared need here was we probably can as a community be doing better towards having structured education pathways and mentorship programs to help people with the how and the what in terms of getting involved locally, as well as figuring out how they can actually get to the point where they're contributing to our broader global community. Another clear theme was that while we are trying to be one global community, there's a need and a value in specialization, particularly across clinical domains. And I saw lots of posts and notes where it's something like, well, I got to make this work for oncology, or I got to make this work for rare disease, or I got to make this work for ophthalmology. And I think there's the thing that we need to do is recognize the commonalities of the work that we're doing, but also accommodate the fact that there may be, area domain-specific opportunities for work to be done. And we saw progress in the phenotyping space, but I think that there's probably still quite a bit more room for growth and expansion when we focus on specific clinical use cases. Sixth theme that came out was about phenotyping, the concept sets and vocabularies. There was a lot of folks talking about interest in developing phenotypes and evaluating phenotypes. A lot of discussions even just on the more basic issues of like code lists. How do we build them? How do we ensure that we've got the right codes? And how do we integrate that with the OHDSI vocabularies? Multiple folks expressed a real desire to see a more well-curated phenotype library with clearer guidance about how to use those phenotypes and vocabularies in our workflows. And that seems like a very clear opportunity that we're making good progress on, but we need to continue to work together as one community. Number 7 theme that came out of those Post-its was infrastructure tools and analytic workflows. The folks were talking about how they have their own local environments. They're trying to figure out how to accommodate and work with OHDSI tools within their environments, recognizing the value of open source solutions, but also recognizing the challenges that an open source solution that's supposed to work for everybody represents when you try to get it to work within one given instance. And clear opportunities for us to figure out how to make it an easier pathway to install and configure tools and infrastructure within our community. And then I think this is the last theme. Yeah, the last theme that came out was around collaboration, governance, and funding. Lots of people said what they wanted was money. I can tell you the one thing that George and I are not going to be able to provide y'all is money. Because we need to figure out how to find some ourselves just to be able to sustain the shared infrastructure for this community. However, I think that beyond money, we can think about collaboration and collaborative opportunities for things like joint grant writing, shared governance, and shared infrastructure that can actually support making sure that whatever limited resources we have can be maximized in terms of their use for our community. So in total, what GPT summarized in terms of what are we currently doing, what do we want to be doing, and what do we need help? What we're currently doing seems to be a lot of focus on data standards. Lots of folks talking about their progress in using the OMOP Common Data Model, starting to do some very limited analysis, beginning that journey of teaching or teaching others some of the basic skills. But there was a clear sentiment that what we want to be doing is doing advanced analytics, larger network studies, contributing phenotypes, and engaging in international collaboration, recognizing the value of the regional efforts that we're doing, but also recognizing the need to generate evidence at a global scale. Where we heard that people need help is in the areas of vocabulary and ETL and the use of our tools. And these are things where all of us can help others in these spaces by making this pipeline a little bit more efficient. So I'm going to thank you for humoring me just to go through what we learned from the Post-it notes. And I think that at least my impression about this is that this feels about right to me in terms of where we are as a community, but also provides, I think, some clarity about where we could go given where everybody, at least that attended the global symposium, was at. Now I want to pivot to a different conversation we had. Of course, our community is led by our work group leaders who are trying to foster specific delivering on objectives and key results within their specific key area. We have over 40 work groups in our community, and all of them have been trying to advance their portion of the OHDSI mission. So at the last month, I asked our work group leaders to fill out a survey. I asked them specifically to restate what were their work group's objectives and key results. What did they accomplish this year? What was their main accomplishment as well as their main miss? And what lessons learned should we share with the community? I also asked them, are you going to keep going? And for the 28 work groups that responded, all of them said they will continue in 2028, which I think is a good sign. The last question I asked, which was, what can the OHDSI steering work group that George and I lead do to be helping them? And we actually got quite a lot of good actionable information coming out of this, but I want to, in full transparency, share these results with you. Now, remember, we use the objectives and key results framework in OHDSI as a way to just at least monitor how well we're doing. And we ask all of our work groups to state up front what is their small number of objectives with a list of tangible key results that at the end of the year we should be able to see and measure the progress we made. And in the spirit of how Google has been using OKRs for many years, the idea would be you want to hit some sort of sweet spot of like, you want to make progress, but you don't want to hit 100% of your goals because it means you didn't set your target high enough. And you don't want to meet like less than half of your goals because it means either you set the wrong goals or you don't have a realistic expectation of what you can achieve. So this question about what were your goals and what did you accomplish, a good way to start is just to say, well, what fraction of those goals, objectives, and key results did we hit? And it was interesting to actually look at the data across our work groups who responded. This is a graph basically just showing on that scale from 0, we didn't achieve any of our key results, up to a 10 where we achieved 100% of results. We see a pretty nice distribution of values in terms of our work groups' accomplishments in 2025. Indeed, we've had subgroups that maybe missed the mark and didn't achieve what they had aspired for. Some groups that really seem to have achieved really well. But actually, the majority of our community was in that range of like 50 to 80%, which is probably suggesting that we're getting pretty good at trying to set objectives that are ambitious, but somewhat realistic, given the constraints and the challenges that we have of being a volunteer community and trying to get everybody to engage and participate in that. So I want to thank and recognize all of our work group leaders for their efforts in establishing objectives at the start of the year and trying to move our community forward in those directions, and to congratulate all of you who have contributed to delivering on some of those objectives. Now, again, I used GPT to try to summarize those collective findings across all of our work groups and to summarize where we were at with that. And so based on the survey responses from the work group leaders, here's what we summarized as accomplishments. Maturing technical assets and standards. There was a lot of progress towards improving vocabulary quality, processes, and documentation, making progress on ETL guidance, including things like themis conventions, as well as updating and creating more robust analytic pipelines. And as GPT summarized, this indicates that the OHDSI tech stack continues to harden, becoming more robust and easier for newcomers to adopt, which I think that is a charitable way of saying it, given the Post-it notes that say it's still really hard. So maybe we've made progress, but we probably should be nowhere near content with where we're in that progress. Second core theme was about deepening global community engagement, growing international participation, training and onboarding outreach activities, and building bridges with external communities. And this shows that OHDSI is continuing to scale as a global open science ecosystem. And I think that is demonstrated in our actions and behaviors. And even with the headwinds of geopolitical actions that are going on around the world, I think that this is one place where I think we continue to try to lean into believing that we are one global community working together. And I'm quite proud that we've made progress in the face of challenges in that space, in that regard. And then the other key theme here was launching or advancing collaborative initiatives. I think this is really an opportunity that we've started down the path of having some shared efforts in development infrastructures and evaluation frameworks and holding community events. I think that shows that we're increasingly organizing around shared work rather than discussion alone. However, I think that this is clearly an area that if I were to provide an assessment and say, like, we still are in the area where we're learning from each other rather than co-creating as much as we could. And I hope that that's an area that we can continue to evolve in. In terms of opportunities of improvement, according to our work group leaders' input, insufficient dedicated technical contribution. The main pain point is people, time, and resource, and particularly as it relates to technical capabilities, like making sure that you get the right people with the right amount of resource to get things done. And as a volunteer community, this is something we can only hope to build the community and expand the resources that were available, but also all of us finding the ways to bring in resources where possible to help meet this need. Clearly, the needs of global public health are immense, and we're not going to be able to solve it all by ourselves as a community, but the more we build something out, the more impact and progress that we can make. Many folks, the work group leads, highlighted that part of the reason for slow progress was just due to limited participation and follow-up. And indeed, this is the struggle that we have as a volunteer army trying to work together. It's something that we'll continue to try to work on as leaders to make progress, but also give each other the grace to recognize that very few of us are or none of us are doing this purely because we're paid to do this. Almost all of us are doing this because we believe in a cause and are trying to make it work within the confines of our normal day-to-day activities, and we need to give ourselves some grace for that. There was also opportunities for us to improve in terms of clear ownership, roadmap, and execution, as well as improving our standardized processes. And I thought that it was interesting to see these called out as opportunities improvement. Very frequently, folks will ask me or George about the hierarchical structure of OHDSI, and we oftentimes talk about that, like the lack of organization is our organization, because we want to enable and encourage folks to evolve as a community. However, lots of the feedback that we get was probably we could be more effective as a group if we provided a little bit more direction and a little bit more structure. And that's something that we certainly can take on board. And that would also help, given that we are a community trying to be based on standardized data and standardized analytics, that standardized governance and standardized processes could also help that in certain regards. And then what's needed from the steering work group, or I would actually assert more broadly, from all of us together working together. There's interest from the work group leads in greater strategic direction and prioritization, help with figuring out how we create participation opportunities for folks and cross-group collaboration, as well as more dedicated technical and engineering support, given the constraints that we have, but trying to figure out how we deploy resources more effectively. And I don't have any magic bullet for this, but I will just make the plea that I think one of the main ways that we could actually gain efficiencies in resources is if we figure out how to actually focus on the core set of problems that we want to work on and solve them together, rather than having dozens of groups independently solving the same problem and then showcasing their results afterwards. And so I think a large part of this is going to be a shared responsibility that we all need to take to figure out how we actually really live into working together as one community. And then finally, what does this mean for OHDSI's future direction? It was interesting that GPT summarized this as OHDSI's transitioning from a community-driven innovation to an infrastructure scale reliability. And I'm not sure that I'm really willing to buy into all of that, but I do think that it's a interesting thing to think about where we are on a maturity map, and think about the progress that we can be made. GPT summarized that the greatest bottleneck is no longer ideas, it's operational capacity. And I do think that we have tremendously brilliant researchers and scientists from all around the world that do have a clear vision of how we can improve the lives of patients around the world. But part of it's just about execution, and figuring out how we do that better makes good sense. Work groups want stronger alignment and intentional coordination, and this is probably going to be an area that we'll have to figure out how to focus on next year, because I think it's I'll assume the responsibility of saying, like, we need to figure out as a steering work group in particular, like how we can help facilitate and foster all of you to be your best selves by being connected with each other in the most effective way. And then this last comment, which I actually kind of giggled when I saw it. GPT said, "If OHDSI builds the scaffolding, the community can build the future." I giggle at that because I feel like I've been building scaffolding with George and others for quite a long time with this hope that we're going to build the future. But as George keeps reminding me in the last like 3 months of calls, every time we meet, he says, well, we're 12 years in now. And so at some point, the future needs to become the present. And I'm very bullish about what the future holds for us, but I also think that we're at a point now where we can not talk about the potential of what we can do as a community, but actually should focus on realizing the value that we deliver. So that is the summary of work group leads input to match it up to the community's input from the posted notes at the Global Symposium. The last thing that I wanted to share as a year in review was I asked GPT to do deep research on OHDSI based on whatever it could find in the external domain. I asked it to write its own year in review, and on the basis of its year in review, I asked it to create a list of top 10 most impactful accomplishments by the OHDSI community. So with that, I'm going to share with you the GPT top 10 list of most impactful accomplishments this year. Drum roll, please. So yes, this is not Letterman's top 10 list. It's GPT, which is a decidedly worse version. But nonetheless, I thought that this was fun to actually see how it interpreted our accomplishments together. So number 10, global proliferation of regional nodes and national OMOP initiatives. 2025 saw a surge in national and regional OHDSI efforts, signaling a shift from isolated pilots to coordinated national strategies to build on standards. Number 9, expansion of the OMOP CDM into new domains. Community-driven extensions into various subspecialties, broaden the clinical questions we can answer, moving beyond the classic claims and EHR data. Number 8, methodologic advances in calibrated federated causal inference. There's been new work in negative control-based calibration, Bayesian evidence synthesis, one-shot federated target trial emulation, improving the robustness of effect estimation across decentralized data, directly addressing bias and heterogeneity in observational research. Number 7, first ever OHDSI Africa Symposium. The inaugural OHDSI Africa Symposium established a new continental chapter, delivered a full day tutorial, 2-day conference, and seeded an African research around OMOP and OHDSI, hugely expanding OHDSI's reach in low and middle income health systems. Number 6, maturation of the HADES ecosystem and new orchestration tools. Key HADES packages were upgraded and new tools such as Strategos emerged, making it dramatically easier to design, execute, and share complex network studies reproducibly across many data partners. Number 5, strengthening and tooling across standardized vocabularies. Major vocabulary work, such as improved mappings of national drug vocabularies and ontology-based vaccine mappings and vocabulary versioning, advanced semantic interoperability made it easier for new countries and disease areas to join the network with high-quality concept alignment. Number 4, most impactful accomplishment OHDSI, according to GPT, high-impact network studies answering urgent drug safety questions. Multi-database OHDSI studies tackled pressing safety issues, including GLP-1s and serious adverse events, and other pharmacovigilance questions across more than 10 databases worldwide, directly supporting regulatory and clinical decision-making. I think I would assert very strongly that that would have been my number 1, because our goal is to generate evidence, but at least GPT recognized that we made enough progress to get it in the top 10. Number 3, consolidation of OHDSI Europe as a regulatory grade RWE engine. The OHDSI Europe Symposium highlighted the tight integration with Darwin EU and the European Health Data Space plans, cementing OHDSI and OMOP as a core infrastructure for the EMA and national regulators to generate decision-grade evidence. Number 2, the 2025 OHDSI Global Symposium as a truly global hub. The Global Symposium gathered hundreds of collaborators from 6 continents, showcased over 100 projects, and emphasized build trust and evidence through open, reproducible methods and global collaboration, including the Titan Awards recognition of key contributors. So shout out to Craig for doing enough publicity that GPT believes that our Global Symposium was in the top 2. Well done. But the number one most impactful accomplishment in the OHDSI community in 2025, according to GPT, is the launch and rapid growth of the OHDSI Evidence Network. A formal public-facing network of OMOP CDM data partners was launched and rapidly expanded, reaching dozens of databases across 4 continents, many with tens of millions of patients each. This has created a coordinated global substrate for large-scale federated evidence generation. So I share that only partially in tongue-in-cheek. I think it's interesting to reflect on how the external environment maybe is representing what we all as a community has generated. I think that all of these items on this list, regardless of order, are things that are worthwhile for us to celebrate. I also think many of them point to the prospects and opportunities of where we can go together, because I don't think any of us should be satisfied where the OHDSI Evidence Network is today. I don't think any of us should be satisfied with our network studies that we've done today, or our open source tools, or the methods research we're doing, because there's so much more work to be done. But also, I think it's worth celebrating the fact that we've made such great progress in 2025, building on the success that we've as a community have made over the last decade. And it's really great to see that even a chatbot knows that OHDSI is doing good stuff, as summarized by this list. All right, so with that, I'm going to flip over to the poll everywhere, which, there we go. And I want to take a look at your reflections, comments, questions, highlights, lowlights, and other observations. I'll just start scrolling through and reading these, but if anybody also would like to share their own thoughts and reflections, feel free to raise your hand, and I should be able to see it, or Craig, I'll ask you to call out as others on the call want to share their reflections for their year in review. First one I see here is incredibly proud to pulling off the inaugural OHDSI Africa Symposium in Uganda. Certainly that's something that Cynthia and Agnes, Alex, and the entire team deserve tremendous credit for pulling off, and it's great to see how many people came and how much real progress has been being made in the region. So congratulations to the community for that. So let's click this so they'll go away, I guess. Taking time to both mourn and celebrate the lives of and contributions of those we've lost this year, including Jamie and Andrew. I did not start my presentation with this because I didn't want to be a downer, but yeah, 2025 sucked for lots of reasons. I'm proud of how our community has been resilient with loss. It was very touching to me that at our Pan-Canadian OHDSI event, we were able to pay tribute to Jamie, and we've been able to see many tributes to Andrew and all of their contributions to our community. And while we may have lost them in 2025, we're certainly their contributions to our community is going to endure and be something that we can continue to build on as a community moving forward. And another shout out to Jamie and Andrew, and for our community to endure that. In the UK, we set up a new OMOP-based real-world evidence network, Huron, and delivered 2 studies. It's great to see the regional progress that's being made, even if Alex won't let me to his events. In Sweden, we had 31 speakers and 175 participants in a very successful first OHDSI symposium, and 94% of attendees were open to exploring possible involvement, and 96 were willing to investigate possibilities of implementing OMOP in their organizations. It would be amazing to translate those wants into delivery. And thanks again to Christian and Jordan for their work in making that event possible. Darwin software is a new way of working with an OMOP. It's great to see the progress that's been made in the publications on the Darwin tools, and the fact that those Darwin tools are being made publicly available so that everybody can benefit from them. We've showcased those tools in multiple tutorials that are available on the new tutorial website that Craig opened up, and encourage folks to take a look at that, as well as noting that tools such as the treatment patterns tool have now made it into the Hades ecosystem, and it's something we really want to encourage shared adoption moving forward. More on Sweden, we managed to get initial government funding. So money's good. So to improve adoption of OMOP and to get registry data and progress in respiratory disease, which is great to see. All right. Shout out to me and George and Craig. Thank you for that. The TidyR working group has released a book. Definitely you should take the shout out to Marty and the team. Definitely you should take a look at the resources that are being made available for those that want to learn how to use the OMOP CDM more effectively in a more agile programming interface. The team at Oxford's done a great job of trying to make resources available for that. All right. And more on Sweden. Starting to wake up in terms of the interest in OMOP and OHDSI. We have had some early adopters in the past. This level of adoption has been somewhat modest, but during 2025, we've generated a lot of interest. It's great to see.